Welcome to the Next Pivot Point podcast. This season, I'm focused on sharing stories and ideas from experts on diversity and inclusion. In this bonus episode, I am going solo to share some insights and ideas. My hope is that you leave today with some actionable tips to think about and discuss with your organization. I share this information because inclusive leadership is a journey. It requires bravery and courage. And you don't have to do it alone. At Next Pivot Point, I believe we're stronger together. We are one. So let's dig into the topic this week. Another key question I am being asked, headed into the home stretch of 2020 into 2021, what is top of mind for leadership teams and diversity, equity, and inclusion leaders around the country and the globe, for that matter, is how do I facilitate inclusive meetings? How do I have inclusive meetings? So lots changed this year, right? We're now virtual, which means Zoom and other technologies rather than FaceTime. And I would argue, as a facilitator that made that migration myself and has been facilitating virtually for many, many years, last 7 or 8 years actually, I was one of the guinea pig people with Zoom, believe it or not, 5 years ago. So I would say, yes, it is different, but there's also a lot very similar to the virtual world that because the settings changed, we assume everything has changed. And I do not believe that everything has changed. We just overemphasize those differences. So if you can go with me out on a limb there that yes, things have changed, but a lot of the things that work in the live setting work in the virtual setting for facilitation, and how to make sure your meetings are inclusive. So some pain points. I wanted to start with some pain points that my clients have expressed to me. If this resonates with you, please do listen to this full mini-sode because I think you'll find some good nuggets that I'm going to share with you to work through. The pain points I'm hearing around meetings are meeting fatigue. Looking at myself on a camera all day is exhausting. And if I'm a senior leader, that means my calendar is pretty busy from 8 to 5, if I'm lucky, to get a bathroom break and the ability to eat. People assume that back-to-back meetings is okay because I'm at home anyway. Yeah, meeting fatigue is a real thing. I hear you, stacked meetings, looking at yourself on a camera, sitting in front of a computer is not the way our body's intended to be, certainly for 8, 9, 10 hours a day. That I hear you. The other pain point that I'm hearing is, wow, the people that were interrupters and talkers in meetings before are even worse on virtual meetings now. So we have the person that is the air hog, the person that does not respect other people's opinions and dominates the meeting. We have all these characters. We had them before. It was just easier to see the body language around the room than maybe it is in a virtual setting. So how do we manage those meeting dominators? How do we manage the flow of the conversation so that people have equal opportunity to be included and to be heard? When we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, diversity is having a seat at the table. Inclusion is like feeling like your voice is heard at the table, feeling a sense of belonging in that meeting space. So if your meetings are being dominated by a certain type of person, I would definitely take a look at that as an opportunity to get better. And then pain point number 3 for meetings that I'm hearing is just managing difficult people, managing different personalities. So what do I do if I have somebody that tends to not show up to a meeting, and if they do, they're not present, they're not participating in a way that's helpful to the team? How do I balance those perspectives? And then if I have on the other end more introverted people, how do I get their perspective in the meeting? How do I pull them into the conversation so they feel like their voice is being heard? How do I balance all these different types of personalities? To really get an inclusive meeting, I need to hear from everybody that's included in it. So I've got some ideas on that one too. So if any of those pain points resonated with you, stay with us. From a best practice perspective, how to facilitate inclusive meetings, I would say there are some facilitation techniques that I have used in the past that are very powerful that I wanted to share with you. And this helps set the tone for an inclusive meeting. So actually, what I would argue, whether you're having the meeting in person or on a phone or a Zoom call, these things work regardless. The first one I would say is prepare. And this sounds totally obvious, but I have heard so many people that have said, we'll get on the call and people say, so what do we want to talk about today? Like, how do you not know that if you're the meeting leader, right? The facilitator? Gotta have an agenda. So blocking and tackling. Yes, always have an agenda. I always have 3 bullet points on my agenda. We're going to cover A, B, and C. Is that okay with you? Is my check-in at the beginning of a call, a beginning of a training. Every single thing I do always has clear objectives. And we start the meeting with those objectives and weigh in so people can weigh in on those to buy in. And then we also say, here's where we want to go with this meeting. What are the expected meeting outcomes? Okay, so if we don't know where we're going, how are we going to get there? So by the time we end this meeting, we want to accomplish A, B, and C. Is that fair? Okay, let's go. So you're actually getting permission to focus on those agenda items, which comes in later with different personalities. It makes it harder for someone to go rogue on you if you agreed up front that this is what we were going to cover, which means by default, other topics are out of bounds. So we've set some boundaries, okay? So we want to frame the meeting and the outcomes up front. We also want to get participation early. Gone are the days of presenting death by PowerPoint presentations on meetings, right? That didn't work before. I don't know why we ever used meetings to digest information. It's such a poor use of everyone's time. We're not going to present information. We're actually going to engage. And so ideally, a facilitator is listening about 60% of the time, and participants are speaking the balance of the time. Facilitators probably asking questions some of that time as well as asserting, maybe 15% of the time is kind of my balance. So 60% listening, 25% asking questions, 15% asserting. As a facilitator, most of your time should be listening to your audience. In order to do that and to set the tone, you want interaction because people are so used to being talked at in meetings. I get participation early. So within the first 5 to 10 minutes of a meeting, I have everybody do a check-in, either, kind of one word to describe how you're feeling right now. Some fun icebreakers I've done over the years is, a fun childhood story. If you've got a longer time for a meeting, that can take some time. Sometimes I'll have people just share like one interesting thing that happened to you this week, a positive focus, something that you're excited about personally or professionally. Again, and if you frame it up front as a facilitator and just take 20 seconds, everyone else will follow suit and take about 20 seconds. If you take several minutes, everyone's going to follow suit and take several minutes. So frame it for them so it doesn't burn all the time for the meeting. But get people to participate early. If I have a big group, I'll just have people chat. Why are you here? Tell us about you and why you're here. And I'll read off some of the chats, not all of them, especially if it's hundreds of people. But get people participating early. I like to do breakout rooms on Zoom very, very early. I have people do a pre-read, come prepared to discuss. Boom, you're going to a chat room or breakout room to actually chat and share your responses live. Okay, so you got to prepare people for something like that. If they're going to participate, let them know that they're going to participate in that way so that they're camera ready and have read whatever they're supposed to read. Reminders. Make it visual. Okay, so I know I'm saying that on a podcast where I can't visually see what I'm talking about. But most people are visual learners. Very few people are auditory learners, learn by listening. Most people learn by seeing. And some people learn by doing, kinesthetic learners, but about 60% of the population is visual. So if you have a screen, use it. Use the whiteboard. Capture notes live on a PowerPoint, a Word doc, whatever you can do to garner, I'm hearing you as you're sharing your ideas, and you can see this live that you're contributing to a bigger thing. There is nothing more necessary as a human being in a meeting setting than seeing your ideas being accepted by the group. That signals connection, that signals belonging, that signals inclusion. Capture things live and reflect it live. You can fine tune it. You can scrub it later and edit it later. Just capture raw live as a facilitator and get their exact words verbatim. Stay on task. As a facilitator, you got to maintain those boundaries. So if you at the beginning said these were objectives and these were our meeting outcomes and people are veering and going sideways on you, you got to bring them back in. I usually let it go on for a couple minutes, and then if I notice it's going to be an issue, we got a meeting dominator, we got an air hog, whatever it is, I bring him back in and I say, hey, we agreed up front we were going to talk about A, B, and C. Is that still okay with you? If so, I'm going to ask that we move back the conversation to this previous point. Or I might say, hey, that reminds me of what someone else was sharing earlier about our meeting objective. Could we go back to Peter's point? You see how you can do that? So it doesn't feel like the person's in trouble. We never want to shame or blame people or call them out in front of a group. But reminding people of the boundaries, reminding people of the meeting outcomes and objectives up front, especially if they agreed to them, they're usually going to be okay with, oh, okay, yeah, that's right. Yeah, we probably should have that conversation somewhere else. Okay. End the meeting with decisions. Ask, save. There's nothing I fear worse than a meeting that just abruptly ends. Oh, we got to go. What are we going to do? Save the last 5-10 minutes, depending on your meeting length and the scope. You might need more time. What did we decide to do today? One of the most powerful questions in a facilitator's back pocket is that question. What are our next steps? Who's doing what? What decisions have we made today? And document them live and delegate and assign them and have someone accountable for them. Because otherwise, you're going to have a Groundhog Day meeting in the next meeting, where the next meeting looks something just like this meeting because we never made any decisions. And this propels that cycle of meeting fatigue and the lack of productivity around meetings in corporate America that I see all too often with my clients. So if those pain points resonate with you, these best practices can really help manage difficult people, those meeting dominators, get more people included in the conversation, as well as combat some of that meeting fatigue if we are being really intentional with our time and striving towards specific outcomes and reminding people of those outcomes at the end. Now, remember, as a facilitator, if you're facilitating a meeting, it is not your job to share content. It is not your job to impart your advice or words of wisdom. You do not have to have all the answers. In fact, the word facilitate actually means to make easier. It is the French word facile, easy. So as a facilitator, I remind myself, I don't have to have the answers. I need to park my bias at the door, at the Zoom room entry, and be curious to learn, to ask questions, to listen, to rarely assert, but to direct the conversation, to make it easier for people to make decisions. And if I take myself out of the equation, it makes it a lot easier to be impartial, a lot easier to listen, a lot easier to be curious, and a lot easier to help the team get the outcomes they want, because it's not about me. It's not personal. Rarely is. So hopefully this is a helpful guide to how to facilitate inclusive meetings. If you like this content, again, you're not alone. Leaders in corporate America and those in the diversity space are wrestling with this one, and no one's looking forward to their calendars full of meetings that are unproductive and not inclusive. So you're not alone. Take these tips. You got enough to be dangerous in this episode, but also invite you to our next online workshop where you can meet leaders to talk about this. It is on December 8th, and you can join us. I'll link to that in the show notes. There'll be other like-minded leaders in the diversity space and in senior leadership and middle management that are facilitating conversations that they want to be more inclusive. So please join us. We're going to have some robust conversation. We're going to practice using some of these facilitation techniques live. And there will be a lot of interaction, a workbook with tools, as well as the recording file that you can use for your unlimited use. So we'd love to see you there. Keep the questions coming. I love getting these questions from listeners and doing these mini-sodes. So thank you for joining us for this episode. Who do you know that needs to hear this message? Hit the share button and also connect with me on LinkedIn. I post every day, Julie Kratz, Kratz. You can find us anywhere you get podcasts. Every review helps other allies find us. I host this podcast because I believe we are stronger together. We are one.